Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verses 6 and 7 we will cover today. Some aspects of those who are not mu'mineen, i.e., who are called Kafir by the Quran. These are the references which are used in putting these slides together. And all extracts or excerpts are taken from the Meanings of the Quran, Volume 1. And this is our contact. Recap verses 4 to 5, which we covered in our previous presentation. What is revealed in the Quran is guidance for mankind and is not product of human intellect. Now, this is an important point which we should keep in mind as students of the Quran, that what we are reading or studying while we are consulting the Quran, it is not a product of human intellect, but human intellect can understand it through evidence and through reasoning. And why it is important? Because we can keep checking that what we are studying, can human being think like that? And we will see that before coming to the Quran, we cannot think like that. We have to find it out from the Quran, how to alter and transform our thinking. The human intellect has no inbuilt guidance. And that's a very important point. When we talk to others as well, we should mention it. And they can check it themselves. Because at every point in time, every crossroad of life, we make a choice. And whatever it thinks and decides, it comes from the inside into the external world. In the case of the Wahi of Allah, it descends from the outside and its source is divine. It cannot be human intellect. In terms of its guidance, this Wahi of Allah is consistently the same from earlier times up to the Quran. And this is a fact. It has to be the same because laws of Allah are immutable. The same values are applicable to us as these were applicable to first man on this earth, and these will be applicable to last people on planet Earth. It was sent to various Anbiya prior to the last messenger. It was tampered with by man. And man, because man does not like the Wahi of Allah, guidance of Allah, what they do is they tamper it. They try to change it. It was completed in every respect to meet the needs of guidance for mankind for all times in the book of Allah called the Quran. It is preserved and protected and will serve as guidance till the end of times on planet Earth. So the original text of the Quran is preserved and protected, and it is for all times. Obviously, the translations are dependent on the understanding of human beings who are translating these verses. Those who accept Eimaan in it hold themselves accountable as per the law of requital and have firm conviction in the life of the hereafter. By following the Quran, mu'mineen acquire the guidance of the Quran and become eligible for all those benefits and successes which are intrinsically linked to obedience to the laws of Allah. An overview of today's presentation. After being introduced to the fundamentals of becoming Muttaqeen, next the Quran points to the next category of people in the world. This category is that of Kuffar, who reject the guidance of the Quran when it is presented to them and do not feel any need for it. So they use their choice. So today we are going to talk about that why people use that choice and what are its implications. And how do we understand those people and their psyche who reject the message of the Quran. So it is essentially for the students of the Quran, because the Quran is a guidance for those who wish to become Muttaqeen, who wish to become mu'mineen. Like Eimaan, which is accepted after using all mental faculties, in Kufr also rejection comes after using the rational side of the intellect. As a consequence of this rejection, the human psyche is affected. And the Quran points to these effects, which include the blocking of hearts and of hearing, and not being able to see the aspects of guidance in the book of Allah. This leads to adverse effects in this life, which are declared to be a supreme punishment. And this is very interesting. As we go through these slides and share what is written over there, we will see that the Kuffar by anyone affects human psyche. The same way Eimaan affects our psyche, Kufr also affects our psyche. Explaining the psyche of those people who resort to Kufr, a stage is reached where any further admonishment and warning has no effect on them, because they have decided deliberately not to accept Eimaan and instead to follow the path of their unbridled desires. Next point is, implicit in this verse is the message of guidance for Mu'mineen to become fully cognizant of the challenges lying ahead of them. This helps in understanding the man-made world and the human psyche behind it. Understanding Kufr is intrinsically linked to understanding Eimaan and its acceptance. Now let us go to the first verse of today's talk. Like Eimaan, we need to act to display Kufr. Inna allazina kafaru sawaun alayhim a anzartahum am lam tunzirhum la yu'minun. This is the category of those people who wish to avoid the destructive outcomes of the wrong path of life, and their desire is that the correct path of life appears before them. And this is from our previous verses, this first few lines. Contrary to this, the other category is of those people in front of whom the correct path of life appears clearly, but due to arrogance, jealousy, pride, rebellion, and due to their vested interests, they do not adopt it. They themselves do not tread on this path and prevent others from treading on it too. It is immaterial whether these people are made aware of the destructive outcomes of this path or not. They will never adopt the correct path. It is futile to tell the person who is bent upon committing suicide that poison is fatal and to stay clear of it. Such admonishment is beneficial only to he who wishes to remain alive. Some important aspects covered in this verse, and we will go through these details now. Some aspects of Kufr. The common translation of this verse is, as to those who reject faith, that is Kufr, it is the same to them whether you warn them or do not warn them, they will not believe. That is, they will not accept Eimaan. But this is the translation. In the translation, they say who reject faith and then will not believe. And we know that faith, belief are not the same as Eimaan, because Eimaan is firm conviction based on evidence. From this, it appears as if there is a category of people who are assigned to this group among mankind, and it is their fate to be like this, i.e. to be Kafir. This impression arises when the translators do not understand the process of accepting Eimaan themselves. That is, they haven't really come to grips with the previous verses and other verses of the Quran. And they do it very mechanically and do not link this verse to previous verses, including Surah Al-Fatiha. Here it is implicit that for someone to resort to Kufr means that he or she has understood what the Quran is inviting them to, i.e. to its guidance with respect to its program of Rububiyyat. If we read this translation, it looks as if it is inevitable, because those who have rejected Eimaan or they have accepted Kufr, that means that somehow they cannot be influenced by the message of the Quran. So we will go through this aspect now. We now look at some aspects of the root of the term Kufr. It means to hide and cover. The night is called Kafir as its darkness covers all things. A dark cloud is also called Kafir because it creates shadows and darkness. Furthermore, river and sea are also called Kafir as things are hidden within their folds. A farmer is called Kafir as he hides the seed in soil. Some more aspects of this root. From this aspect, in opposition to a mu'min, a kafir will be one who wishes to keep concrete realities in the background, who conceals the eternal truths bestowed by Allah and does not let these appear in front, or he who hides his own or others' potentials and does not let these manifest, not letting these develop and grow. It's a very powerful word, and we have to come to terms with its meanings, because we can see the manifestation of this in the world around us, where millions and millions of children are not getting education. Then that is something which is the demonstration or display of the system of Kufr. From the aspect of hiding, it also acquired the meaning of rejection. In opposition to Eimaan, this is the meaning of Kufr, i.e. denial of the Quranic truths. The grave is also called Al-Kufru because the corpse is put in it and hidden within it. Kufr also appears as the opposite of Shukr. because the meaning of shukr is for something to emerge and appear in front. And we know that shukr means that all those potentials and abilities which are within us, their manifestation, their coming out is part of this process of doing shukr. Its root is given here. From this, the meaning of kufran nemat is to hide the name of Allah. And nema we know are the bounties of Allah. And kufran nemat will be to hide the bounties of Allah, which are available to whole of mankind, and some people hide them. And those who hide them and hoard them, they are doing kufr. Do not keep these available for the benefit of mankind. Next slide is, it is essential to have knowledge of the guidance. We have seen above that the meaning of kufrun is to hide away, that is to deny. Because when we hide something from others and we know that these can be useful to others, it means that we are doing kufr. It is obvious that only those matters can be hidden about which man has knowledge, and denial can also be only of them. The question of concealment or denial regarding those matters about which someone has no knowledge whatsoever does not even arise. Therefore, the meaning of kufr will be that the Quranic truth should be within someone's knowledge, and that he either hides them or denies them. So the first prerequisite that is that one should have the knowledge of, or at least the core message of the Quran, for example, in relation to system of deen and some of its permanent values. And then having come across that, then one tries to hide them, because one knows that these might benefit others. And if one hates the Quran, then he or she is not going to disclose it to others. So that will be display of kufr. It is essential to have knowledge of the guidance. For example, in this verse, Quran says, Inna lazina kafaru wa saddu an sabilillahi wa shaqur rasula min ba'di ma tabayyana lahumul huda. Those who do kufr hinder from the path of Allah. It's one of the traits of these people. And resist the messenger. Resisting the messenger means resisting the message of the Quran, after guidance has been clearly shown to them. So this is a prerequisite for doing kufr, that they are aware of the guidance of the Quran very clearly. This point is also made clear in another verse, and I will go through the meanings of it. O assembly of jinn and ins, and we know jinn are all those people who are living in the rural areas, are nomadic people, and ins, of course, those human beings who live in habitations. Came there not unto you messenger from amongst you, setting forth unto you my signs and warning you of the meeting of this day of yours. So this is a sort of a question put forward to jinn and ins by the Quran. They will say, we bear witness against ourselves. And this is interesting, that human beings are a witness against their own selves. We do not need a witness against our own self if we are honest to our own self, that what are our faults and what wrongs we do, and of course what good we do. It was the life of this world that deceived them. So against themselves will they bear witness that they are kafirin. Very important, and I have highlighted some of these points over here. For example, وَشَهَدُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ أَنَّهُمْ كَانُوا كَافِرِينَ. And they will not become kafir because somebody else will call them kafir. They will be witness against their own self if they use the evidence of the Quran. Next slide is, the outcomes of our deeds serve as an evidence. In this way, they will give evidence against themselves. And after this, it is stated, this is so because your Rabb would not destroy for their wrongdoing men's habitations whilst their occupants were unwarned. And this is a permanent value. No country, no nation, no people are destroyed unless they have been warned about the evil effects of their deeds. And that is why it takes time. For example, in today's world, we can see all those powerful nations who have been doing wrong in the world for a fairly long time. They have been adequately warned again and again because of their own evil deeds, but they ignore them. This is so because it is not the way of Allah that He should destroy some nation without warning them about the consequences of their wrong system. Doing this will be injustice, and Allah does not do injustice to anyone. From this too, the meaning of choosing kufr becomes evident, i.e., the condition for this is that the truth should have appeared before someone and they refuse to acknowledge it. So all these nations who are continuing to do wrong, despite knowing that these are harming other people, are in a state of kufr. Similarly, in Surah Al-Mu'min, it is stated, those in the fire will say to the keepers of hell, pray to your Rabb to lighten for us the penalty for a day. They will say, did there not come to you your messengers with clear signs? They will say, yes. They will reply, then pray as you like, but the prayer of the kafirin is nothing but futile wandering in mazes of error. Because once the results of the deeds start appearing, then we have lost all time of respite, and that is the time for the law of requital to do its job. And then these nations are replaced by other nations. Admonition and its propagation. It is important that the meanings of the word anzar, there is a word used in the verse which appears in this verse, are also clarified, i.e., it is the same to them whether you warn them or do not warn them. So nazar. As stated above, the customary meaning of this is that of frightening them. The correct meaning does not become evident from making them fearful. The meanings of anzar are to apprise someone of the potential harm or loss in some matter before its occurrence, and in this way to forewarn him about the dangerous outcomes. The vanguard, which routinely traveled ahead of an army so that it could warn it by detecting the movements and activities of the enemy, used to be called Naziratul Jaish. And Jaish means army, and of course Naziratul, that they were like advance guard in front of this army which is making an advance. According to the law of requital of Allah, there is a consequence of every deed of man and an outcome of every system. The messengers of Allah used to warn people according to the wahi of Allah that the consequence of your wrong path will be destructive, whereas the outcome of the righteous path will be prosperous. According to the former, they used to be called Nazir, that is the warners, i.e., the one warning about the calamitous effects of their wrong path. And according to the latter, it was Bashir, i.e., the one giving glad tidings of the propitious results of treading on the right path. Based on this, the meanings of anzarun will be to apprise or warn, not merely to frighten. And warning is an important part of human living. For example, we warn our children, we warn our friends, we warn our brothers, sisters within the family, and at a larger scale, we warn people in a country as well as the whole world is warned as well by certain leaders. So warning is part of it, because once we have served the warning, that means if people ignore it, then they become responsible for their deeds. So it is an essential part of human living. Next slide is for those who wish to be alive. The Quran serves as a warning. Kufr is to ignore this warning, and that is important. When we warn people and they do not listen to it, and when we warn others, we are actually warning ourselves as well, because there is no point myself warning others that don't do it and then myself do the same. In Surah Yasin, it is stated, "Lejunzira man kana hayyan wa yahiqqul qawlu alal kafirin," that it may give warnings to any who are alive. And it also means those who wish to be alive, because once we are warned, then we become more cautious, more alive. We think of the consequences of our choices, and that the charge may be proved against those who are kafirin. So rejection of Quran's warning means that we have become a kafir. And that is important, because kufr over here is a state of human psyche where this psyche ignores the warning and ignores the consequences of one's wrong choices in life. There are fundamentally two doctrines in relation to human life. One doctrine is that the life of a human being remains busy in movement and action under the obedience of physical laws. And when this machinery ceases to function, that is according to these same laws, then that is called death, as a result of which this person ceases to exist. That is, we think that human beings are just physical beings, and once we die, our brain is dead and there is no more existence. And that is kufr as well, because if we think there is nothing within us which can go beyond our death. The second doctrine is that man is not just defined by his body. Other than the body, there is another thing within him which is called his self, nafs, or his khudi, or ego. This is neither a product of physical laws, nor is it under the control of these laws. This is the fountainhead of human intent and choice, and it is on this that the result of every deed of man is, you could say, imprinted. It is not impacted in the slightest by the death of the body. This continues forward, taking these imprints of this individual's deeds with it. This is called the life of the hereafter, in which its rank is defined according to these imprints of which it is the possessor. This is the Quranic doctrine of life. The development of the human self is the purpose and goal of the Quranic program. And we can see evidence of this. Most humanity at present, in 2024, thinks that the life ends with death, including those who are religious and think that they say these words, but they do not have firm conviction in that, because they firstly do not recognize the presence of self within them. For example, under sectarian Islam, they don't like the Quran. They stay outside the Quran, though they say that they believe that it is the book from Allah. So unless we go through the book of Allah and then follow it and understand fully the implications of not following it, we simply cannot have Eimaan in the permanent values of the Quran. And as a result, we do not get any benefits from the Quran. Because Quran is about getting the benefits, the tangible benefits which appear in our life by making it better and by establishing the system of deen. All the problems which we see in the world are because of this Kufr. Some verses on the signs of Kufr in the human psyche. This fact is clarified in two succinct verses of Surah Shams. Truly he succeeds that purifies it, and he fails that corrupts it. The one who has developed himself, his field has achieved fruition. Whoever submerged it under the dust of material interests, his human potentials remain buried. That is, these remain undeveloped. It is clear from this that Kufr means to hide eternal truths and the denial or suppression of one's own self. It is on this basis that life at an animal level is called Kufr, i.e. that doctrine of life in which human life is taken to mean merely a physical life, just like that of animals. It is stated in Surah Muhammad, while those who are kafir will enjoy this world and eat as cattle eat, and the fire will be their abode. And we can see that fire all around in the world, because with that kind of a psyche, we only create problems for others, because everyone works for self-interest, and we can see everything following that kind of mentality in the world. The goal of life of those who adopt the maslak of Kufr, and maslak over here is pattern way, is to eat and drink like animals and to benefit from the physical accoutrements of life, nothing more than this. What can their end be but the hell of destruction? So we can see all these effects manifestation in our world. And that is the way we should look at it, that this is because of the faulty psyche human beings have. Because human beings, unless they think of their own accountability and think of their life which goes beyond physical death, they simply cannot do those things which the Quran is asking us to do. And that is the problem we face in the world. And that is why those who have come to the Quran have to stick with this path so that they can get the help of Allah. Getting help of Allah means understanding His laws and then following those laws to get the best. Next slide is, there is no compulsion in the matter of deen. We have gone through this verse previously as well. La ikraha fi din qad tabayyana ar-rushdu min al-ghayy wa man yakfur bit-taghut wa yu'min billah faqad istamsaka bil-urwat al-wusqa la infisama laha wallahu samiyyun alim. There is no compulsion in deen, because there cannot be. Quran is putting before us two paths of life, and we can select whichever we wish. Truth stands out clear from error. Whoever rejects Taghut and accepts Eimaan in Allah has grasped the most trustworthy handhold that never breaks, and Allah hears and knows all things. I've highlighted over here this part, Yakfur bit Taghut, that is they reject Taghut. Taghut means all those forces which are transgressing and rebelling against the laws of Allah. and yu'min billah, and after rejecting that, which means one has to reject the man-made system and its values and then will come to Allah. If we have some kind of sympathy for the man-made system, thinking that I'm getting benefits out of it, then Eimaan simply cannot enter that head. We might say that I have got Eimaan, and we might be going through the Quran again and again and also discussing it endlessly every day. It makes no difference, because this is a very important sign for us whether we have rejected the man-made system or not. And rejection means based on knowledge, by understanding it, that what this system is doing to other human beings across the world. The Quran has severely admonished those people who adopt the doctrine of compulsion as a defense in order to avoid responsibility. For example, it is stated in Surah Al-An'am that those who give partners to Allah will say, if Allah had wished, we should not have given partners to him, nor would our fathers, nor should we have had any taboos. And this is an interesting thing in this verse, that human beings who do not want to follow the path of the Quran, they accuse Allah. They put everything on Allah. And we use these kind of words, inshallah, mashallah, alhamdulillah, for the benefits we get from the man-made system. So we should be very, very careful about these things, because our thoughts affect our self, and our self then affects our understanding of the Quran. So did their ancestors argue falsely until they tasted of our wrath? Say, have you any certain knowledge? If so, produce it before us. You follow nothing but conjecture. You do nothing but lie. And we can see that if we discuss with people, we will see that they are never sure about anything unless they are on the Quran and its values. Then they will definitely be very solid and concrete that this is the way things are, this is the way facts are in our life in the world. Next slide is some examples of people choosing Kufr. By following in the footsteps of forefathers, which is called taqleed according to the Quran, man surrenders his choice and intent himself. It is stated in Surah Al-Baqarah, when it is said to them, follow what Allah has revealed, they say, nay, we shall follow the ways of our fathers, because it is a convenient way of doing things. And since majority is following their forefathers, hence they merge into the crowd and start getting all the benefits which are associated by following the majority. What, even though their fathers were void of wisdom and guidance. In the next verse, it is stated, the parable of those who are kafir is as if one were to shout like a goat herd to things that listen to nothing but calls and cries. We can see all this on media day in and day out. Even on social media, all kinds of opinions are expressed within the relative values. Deaf, dumb, and blind, they are void of wisdom, because they are not using the rational side of it. They are not pausing and thinking, what is the purpose of my existence? Why am I created? Is this world meant to be like this, or can we create a better world? And where is the guidance? And should I question my own existence or not? So all these questions only arise when we pause and reflect. Those who shirk hard work and live a life of ease at the expense of others are called mutrefin. And this is part of the capitalist system, that somebody else works and others enjoy on their hard labor. To think about some matter using knowledge and intellect, and to then form a decision using one's choice and intent, demands great resolve and exertion. And to accept one's own responsibility demands great courage and determination. The maslak of taqleed is a very convenient path. In this, one neither has to make any decision oneself nor accept any responsibility. And this is a very important point over here in this slide, that if we do not wish to accept responsibility for what we do in life, then literally Quran will never make any sense to us. People have to accept responsibility happily, because in responsibility, in accepting responsibility, we are saying that I am accountable, and then be accountable for our words and deeds. And life becomes very self-conscious, and our consciousness expands with the idea, with the thought of holding ourselves accountable. Being overwhelmed by emotions, that is the next slide. The state of human decision making is such that his sources of knowledge and information, that is, hearing, observation, etc., provide him with data. On the basis of these sources of information, the intellect of this individual reaches some kind of conclusion. In light of this conclusion, he makes a decision for himself. The resolve to carry out this decision is called intent. It is obvious from this that man's decision and intention are dependent on the correct functioning of his abilities of hearing and observing. If these abilities are not functioning correctly, then they neither provide accurate information, nor can the decision based on them be called a correct decision. Intoxication does not only result from alcohol. Whenever and through whatever circumstances human emotions overpower his intellect and thinking, they also acquire the shape of intoxication. And we can see the intoxication of power in the world. For example, what is happening in Gaza and Palestine, what is happening in Ukraine and other parts of the world, wherever exploitation is taking place and murders are taking place as we share these slides. At this point, his intellect and thinking becomes paralyzed. In Surah Al-Qasas, Rasulullah is told that he should give an invitation to the path of haqq and truth to these people. And after this, it is stated, but if they hearken not to you, know that they only follow their own lusts. And a very important sign for us as students of the Quran, that if we give the message of the Quran to someone, including the sectarian Muslims, and they do not want to come to this message, that means they are following their own lusts, period. And who is more astray than one who follows his own lusts, devoid of guidance from Allah? And all these people, can they create a better world than the world we find around us? They simply cannot. So this is an important message which we should take from this presentation on Kufr. Next slide is, nations also fall under the influence of unbridled emotions. This is about individuals. The Quran has also declared about nations that when some nation only views its own interest and ignores the divine values, then its state becomes like this. And particularly, we should keep an eye and for studying people at the top of the pyramid of these nations who control these nations. And we will see that this thing is displayed through their personalities, through their psyches. But of no profit to them were their faculties of hearing, sight, and heart and intellect when they went on rejecting the signs of Allah, and they were completely encircled by which they used to mock at. Their hearing, seeing, and power to make decisions is of no help. These become paralyzed and ineffective, and this is the consequence of rejection and rebellion against the divine laws. They mock these laws and values, and the consequence of this is that the destructive effects of their wrong conduct encircle them from all sides. Initially, they think they are succeeding, but gradually what happens is that people stand up against them and they become victim of their own actions, own evil actions in the world. In connection with those who are overpowered by their emotions and adopt Kufr, the Quran quotes the example of the people of the book, that is its first addresses, when it states, quite a number of the people of the book wish they could turn you, that is the people who have accepted Eimaan, back to Kufr after you have accepted Eimaan, from selfish envy after the truth has become manifest unto them. And this does happen, that any of a friend or any relative who goes towards the Quran and starts talking about the system of deen, these people who are in majority, they want him or her to come back to their fold. And this is something which is very interesting, and the Quran has pointed to this aspect. Next slide is, for acquiring guidance, we need to overcome egotism. Arrogance is also one form of egotism. In this connection, it is stated in Surah Al-Araf, and certainly there came to them their messengers with clear signs, but they would not have Eimaan in that which they had rejected before. This is another very interesting part of human psyche, that people to whom the message is given, if they have rejected it straight away, that means they do not want to leave their own position, one, and secondly, the Quran does not find any appeal for them. And it is very rare that these people will come back to the Quran at some later stage in life. People do come back because it is their choice, But generally, once they have said no, it becomes very difficult for them. That is why, in the matter of choices of life, we should keep our mind open and go for evidence rather than rejecting something straight away. Same goes for any information which comes through to us from media, for example. We should look at it, give it some time, and then see how the facts add up. The Quran has given a clear example of egotism relating to the account of the confrontation between Musa, the messenger of Allah, and Pharaoh. It is stated in Surah Al-Naml that Musa presented such clear rationales before the people of Pharaoh for which they had no answer, and they rejected them in iniquity and arrogance, though their inner selves were convinced thereof. And of course, we do not know the inner selves. It is Allah who knows their inner self. So over here, Quran has pointed to this fact. And we can figure it out over a period of time when people, despite repeated approach, they do not wish to come to the Quran. We should straight away assume in the light of this verse that these people are not willing to come to the Quran. So we should not waste our time in trying to convince them. They kept on refusing to accept these, even though their hearts concurred with them. They had come to recognize that what he is asserting is true, but their rebelliousness and egotism was acting as an impediment to the acceptance of truth, because they were not realizing that what the Quran is telling them is in their own interest. A lot of these people keep complaining about the man-made systems as well, but at the same time, when the solution is presented to them from the Quran, they are not willing to come to it because they do not wish to make any effort on this path. And the path they are following is the path of convenience, so they wish to stay over there. Few more excerpts from the meanings of the Quran, Volume 1. When some nation acquires power through deceitfulness and then in order to keep it established and strong continues to employ every kind of legitimate and illegitimate tactic, then that too does not adopt the path of truth and justice. It continues to reject it and undermine it. But when that messenger arrived, not only did they reject his invitation, but they began to display deep hatred and antagonism towards him, purely because they had authority in the land, and by the acceptance of this truth, then that illegitimate power could no longer have been sustained. These are the people about whom it is stated, it is the same for them whether you warn them or do not warn them, they will not accept Eimaan. And that is in relation to the verse which we are going through. Those people who are captivated by their desires in this way, it is equal to them whether you warn them or not about the destructive consequences of their wrong path. Their emotions of jealousy, hate, prejudice, animosity, vested interests, arrogance in the land, and intoxication of power do not leave any possibility that they can listen to something with their conscious mind and formulate a decision using a moral intellect. A few examples of the manifestation of Kufr. It is Kufr to consider the universe as batil. And Quran says, وَمَا خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاءَ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا بَاطِلًا ذَلِكَ ظَنُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Batil means that something which produces negative results, which is meaningless, which has no purpose. That is aimless pursuit of some aim. For example, if we are watching some kind of entertainment or football matches, nothing comes out of it. It gives us some kind of a temporary pleasure. So that will be batil. So a lot of people who do not pay attention to the whole creation of Allah, they think that this universe is meaningless and man is just a product of some fluke evolution. Not for batil did we create the heaven, earth, and all between. That is the thought of the kafireen. So that makes them kafir, and which means they are never going to come to the Quran because they are not seeking guidance. They think life is all about play and amusement. Duality is kafir, i.e. mixing man-made laws with the Quranic laws, and this goes on under the sectarian Islam's versions. Quran says, أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضٍ فَمَا جَزَاءُ مَنْ يَفْعَلُ ذَلِكَ مِنْكُمْ إِلَّا خِزْيٌ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Then is it only a part of the book that you have Eimaan in, and do you reject the rest? But what is the reward for those among you who behave like this but disgrace in this life? And we can see that by keeping this kind of a duality, that is, getting some part of the Quran which suits them, for example, in relation to rituals, while rejecting the rest of the book. In fact, they hate the book. If you present it to them, they don't like it because it goes against their wishes. Not establishing rule according to the way of Allah, and Quran says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ, and it turns them into kafirs. If any do fail to judge by what Allah has sent down, they are kafirun. They don't want this system. Never mind establishing it, they don't want to even hear about it. They don't want to listen about it. They don't want to even discuss it. Sectarianism is shirk and kufr, and widely prevalent in the world in every religion. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ تَفَرَّقُوا وَاخْتَلَفُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتُ وَأُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. And this is beautiful that they created parties, they differed with each other after the message had reached them. It is not that they were not informed about the message, and as a result, they land up in hell. And these are the people who have created the hell in the world of 2024. Akfartum bada imanikum fazuku azaba bima kuntum takfurun. And see over here the action tense, akfartum, that they have to do it. They do it deliberately. It is not something which they don't do it. For example, if you go to some sectarian people, they will accept that there was no sect at the time of the Messenger of Allah, but still they are not willing to give it up. They manifested kufr after accepting Eimaan. Taste then azab on account of your kufr. So kufr leads to creating problems in the world. It is not that it has no consequences. It has consequences for the human psyche, that is the decision making. And this human psyche then goes and creates chaos, conflict, and bloodshed in the world. Another two aspects of kafirin. In explanation of verse 2-3 of this surah, it was noted under the title of they keep their means of sustenance bestowed by us open for them. If you remember, it says, Mimma razaqnahum yunfikun, that the Quran presents a comprehensive economic system which is distinct and unique from other economic systems. This system uproots the capitalist system from its foundations. The foundation of the capitalist system is based on this ideology that capital also earns wealth. And Quran says the reward is for the work, not the capital. The Quran proclaims this system to be riba and declares it to be a maslak of kufr, such a maslak against which there is an eternal proclamation of war by the Islamic system. While referring to this capitalist system, the Quran has instructed the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen that, O you who have Eimaan, devour not usury, that is riba. And riba means that we get money on the capital. Under the system of deen, ultimately, there is no question of accumulation of wealth in anyone's hand, because the system has Eimaan in the hereafter. And once we take this life as a journey through this world, then we don't accumulate for any journey, because when we are traveling on journey, we travel very light, doubled and multiplied. But fear Allah that you may truly prosper. Fear the fire which is prepared for those who are kafir. And there is a plenty of fire around in every part of the world under the capitalist system. They do not let the Quran be heard. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَا تَسْمَعُوا لِهَٰذَا الْقُرْآنِ. The kuffar say, do not listen to this Quran. We can witness this conduct even among sectarian Muslims. And we know that people don't want to even hear about Allama Parvez and his books and about Tolu Islam. They run away as if they are scared of a lion or a tiger. Now let's go to the last verse of today's presentation. That is the second verse. Our choices impact our psyche and decision making. Verse 7. Khatamallahu ala qulubihim wala samihim wala absarihim gishawatum walahum azabun azim. The consequence of this path of these people is that they no longer retain the ability to see and be aware and to think and understand in the way that one becomes insane with rage. Such dense veils of emotiveness cover their eyes that they simply cannot see the signs of guidance on the path. Their ears become so plugged that despite the ringing of the bells, they cannot find the way to the caravan. Such covers become enclosed on their hearts and minds that despite reflecting on the circumstances surrounding them, they cannot figure out the correct direction. All this is the outcome of their own deeds, which is established according to the law of requital of Allah. In this way, these people deprive themselves of the true excellences of life and sink into the hell of destruction and ruin. How painful is this end of theirs? Some reflection on translations. The common translation of the verse is, Allah has set a seal on their hearts and on their hearing and on their eyes is a veil. Great is the penalty they incur. If this verse is taken out and shared using this translation, then it will appear as if it is Allah who is doing this. And after that, He is putting these people in a punishment for something they have not done. This is the reason that the Quran needs to be studied as part of the functioning of the law of requital and as a complete system of mankind. The students of Deen need to keep these translations in mind, as these have affected the psyche of sectarian Muslims. And we see people quoting these kind of verses as if it is Allah who is sealing the hearts of people and then putting them into fire. And these kind of verses are from where fatalism and the belief of taqdeer originates. And people, since they do not use their mind and they do not reason into it and they do not look at other verses of the Quran, they are carried away by these things and ruin their life. Allah relates human deeds to Himself in some verses. This means all human deeds produce their consequences as per His laws. And this aspect we have discussed previously as well, that in a number of verses, the Quran, Allah relates everything to Himself. And He should relate it to Himself because the intellect which is given to us is given by Him. So if I am doing something, Allah will say that He did it according to the law of Allah. And if He did wrong, His hearing and sight were blocked because He did wrong. To illustrate this further, we will share the translation of another verse. If Allah so willed, He could make you all one people. But He leaves straying whom He pleases according to His law, and He guides whom He pleases. And these kind of words, He pleases, if these are replaced that according to His law, and over here as well, that if it is like what is written in the bracket, then the matter becomes very clear. But you shall certainly be called to account for all your actions. So it is not Allah who is doing things, it is us who are doing that, and according to His laws, we are facing the reality of our own actions and deeds in the world. Aspects harming our psyche. Here the Quran has informed us about the negative effects of resorting to Kufr and has said that the hearts of such people become sealed due to what they do to their own selves as well as to others. This is a serious psychological failing which leads to serious consequences. This needs to be researched and studied, especially by Mu'mineen. There is a lot into it which we simply cannot figure out at this stage of our understanding of the Quran. But once the system of Deen is established, then a lot of research will be required on the human psychological side, that how does Eimaan and Kufr affect human psyche. And of course, there are a number of other aspects which fall under Kufr as well, like shirk and mukazzibeen and other aspects of that, that when people do wrong, how does it affect their psyche? 3 aspects are mentioned here, i.e. their intellectual abilities and their perceptive aspects of hearing and seeing, through which they are supposed to seek evidence and then get guidance. If they had paid attention to the message of Allah rationally, then they would have gathered more evidence through their hearing and seeing in the word, which may have led to accepting Eimaan. What is the consequence of not doing so? They make themselves eligible for the chastisements of this life through their own evil acts. We need to keep in mind that here we should take the view of life as one continuity which extends into the life of the hereafter. If we assume our life ends with death, then the material successes of this life deceive us about the existence of the hereafter. It is all about changing our outlook. And secondly, becoming convinced of this fact that what good we are doing now, we will reap the benefits of it in the later part of our life. And this is very visible. For example, the time and effort we spend on our children, even without the Quran, it does pay. they become successful even within the man-made system, and they do better than others. But if we bring the Quran into it, then it is amazing. It does miracles, and because human personality changes very positively, and as parents, we can benefit from the conduct and behavior of our children, of course, provided that they have listened to the Quranic value system. Some aspects of putting seals on our hearts. Allah puts seals on the hearts of those people who choose Kufr. And over here, I've quoted this verse from Surah Nisa, in that they broke their covenant, they rejected the signs of Allah, they slew the messengers against Haqq, that they said, our hearts are wrapped. Nay, Allah has set a seal on their hearts. And see the cause and effect over here. Because they were doing wrong, وَكُفْرِهِمْ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ, they were doing kufr to the signs of Allah, that is the verses of Allah. And as a result, what happened was, Taba Allahu alayha bi kufrihim. Because of this kufr, their hearts were sealed. It's worth looking at the verses before and after this verse in the Quran. Making wrong choices in life leads to adversely affecting the human psyche, and the Quran points to this aspect continuously from the start to the end. Accepting Eimaan leads to creating that self, which, if it uses the Quranic values, starts to acquire eminence and loftiness, while accepting Kufr leads to debasement of the human self. The word of 2024 manifests this negative side of the human self. And it's a great word to be alive, that is 2024, because all these verses, the signs noted in the Quran, are clearly visible in a system which is based on man-made laws. In another verse, Quran makes it clear, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do they not then earnestly seek to understand the Quran, or are their hearts locked by them? See, the important thing is they have locked their hearts themselves, because Quran presents its evidence before us, its guidance before us, and leaves it to us whether we wish to follow this path or not. There is absolutely no compulsion, because if we accept Eimaan in the Quran under compulsion, under duress, then that is not Eimaan, because we haven't used our freedom to choose. And see how much Allah respects our choice. For both Eimaan and Kufr, we need to open the locks of our own hearts. And finally, the case of those who do not receive the guidance, hence never reject it. And this is an important point, because a lot of times we may be asked that, okay, these people have been given the message and they rejected it. What about those who never received the message and who never rejected it? Are those people who are, for example, very poor, illiterate, and do not understand the Quran? What will happen to them? For the acceptance and rejection of guidance, two conditions need to exist. Firstly, people need to have knowledge and a higher level of self-consciousness in order to understand the guidance of the Quran. Secondly, this guidance either needs to be communicated to them, or they need to seek it themselves and then study it. If after understanding it, they decide to reject it, then they will fall into the category of kafirin. And if they accept it and then act on it, they will become mu'mineen. So this is pretty straightforward, that people understand the message of the Quran. Firstly, they have good knowledge of the man-made system. They have got some education. They can read and write, and they have fairly developed intellect. And then if the message is presented to them, they understand the implications of this message for them, because if they are following their own unbridled desires, they may not like to give these up, so they will reject the message. But those who are more concerned about the mankind, they will accept it, because they think that Allah's help is required in this case to establish the system of deen. So the former will be kafirin and the latter will become mu'mineen. Next is those who do not meet these two criteria. In their case, they will not be called kafirin. And that is important. If a message has not reached anyone, then obviously they have nothing to reject. So they will not be counted among kafirin. And now the question which comes to our mind is, what will happen to them, for example, in the hereafter? In this connection, we need to understand that in connection with the human self, there is no external punishment or reward. And that is an important point to understand, that when we work under the laws of Allah directly, then we are essentially not controlled by the man-made system. While we are in the man-made system, of course, has gotten hold of us. But at the same time, at the level of ourself, we are totally free from the effects of man-made system, and we need to understand that. So punishment and reward is inbuilt within us. It is part of our self-development process and procedure through which we develop, higher or degrade our own self. So if we have not been exposed to the message of the Quran, then just like that, if there is no school in a village, the children of that village will remain illiterate. So the important thing is for us, instead of complaining, we should build a school in every village so that children get education. Similarly, this situation that if those who are come to the Quran understood it, if they haven't conveyed the message to everyone, then those people have not got the option of rejecting it or accepting it. But that does not mean that if the message of the Quran hasn't reached them, somehow their self will be developed. No, like that child in a village without a school will never be able to become educated. Same is applicable here. It is built within us, hence Allah neither rewards or punishes anyone nor interferes in human affairs directly. And this is the bottom line as students of the Quran, that Allah does not interfere in human life directly. He interferes through mu'mineen. Since the word of 2024 is built on non-Quranic values, hence it is a biological word in which human beings are living at an animalistic level. And this is the crux of everything. We should get used to seeing the word with Quran, this lens of the Quran, that if there is no Quran in the word at any point in time, that means those human beings are living life at an animalistic level. Deen does not exist anywhere. Those who wish to bring about a change need to become alive first, as noted. And we have gone through this verse previously. لَيُنذِرَ مَنْ كَانَ حَيًّا وَيَحِقَّ الْقَوْلُ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. Now, what I have done over here in this final slide is I tried to put together something very interesting and schematic on the contents of human consciousness, that what is in our mind at any point in time or in our consciousness while we are living this life. For example, this is a very mechanical human mind which is only aiming at the benefits of this life and who thinks that the life will end with death. What is typical in it? It wants to increase its happiness and minimize its pain. And this is something which is established by human psychology as well. He's very competitive, pursuit of desires. Now, this is the basic aim of every human being, that they want to accomplish their desires. They want to fulfill the desires, and intellect helps them to fulfill those desires. Of course, depending on the conditions in which they are existing on the planet. They have dissonances, and they also wish to acquire power. And this is a very interesting thing, because we have seen in the world that people want to acquire power, or once somebody acquires the power, others wish to be associated with them because they also want to draw some power out of it. And that is why we hear this kind of a term like establishment, or secret power behind this, or some kind of conspiracies going on, that somebody else is the president while there is some kind of a secret state behind it. A family, human beings want a family. They are social animals. They want a job to make a living, or want to have a business so that they can make some money. And then they want wealth. They want house or houses. They want car or cars. So these are the definitions of material successes in the world, and we see examples of it everywhere. For example, if we ask someone, what is your definition of success? They will go over all kinds of material possessions. They want fame as well, because once their basic needs are met, then they want to have some fame. And that is why this celebrity culture exists in our world of today. And then is media and politics, which also affects their mind, and they are influenced by it. And some even become part of this media and politics by joining parties or being part of media. So we can see that in this mind, there is no hereafter, there is no question of guidance, there is no question of higher aim of life or any pursuit of permanent values or anything. It is just about me and around people who are around me. And over here, Quran has pointed to this kind of psyche in some verses. What I've done is I've only quoted the Arabic part of it, and we can look at their translations. They are pretty straightforward translations. Alamu annamal hayatu dunya laibun wa lahbun wa zinatun wa tafakharun bainakum wa takasurun fil amwale. And it's wal awlade. And it's interesting that it starts with alamu, that you should gain knowledge about it, that what is being stated over here, that you should know that most of the people live life like this. They think that the life is about sports and entertainment, and to go after the allurements of life and have some mutual pride in accumulation of wealth and possessions and in children. And there is another verse as well, which we have gone through this surah previously, Alhaakumut takasur hatta zurtumul maqabir, that in terms of pursuing these material gains, and we go through it competitively, and we reach up the graves, that's the cemetery, and we die. And we can look at this verse as well in Surah Al-Imran. Process of creating space for accepting Eimaan plus solid deeds, creating the need and desire for guidance. Now, this is the process through which we move away from this. While we are engaged in this in order to live this life, but we get a balance of it and we question it, that wait a minute, what is going on in our life and the world around us? Why there are problems? Why people are suffering? And is there a better way of living in this world? Can we create a better world in the light of the Quran? What is the procedure for freeing our minds and hearts from the chains we willingly acquire and then do not wish to free ourselves? If we are happy with this kind of a mind and with this kind of a psyche, then of course we are not going to come to the Quran. Even if somebody presents it, we are not going to listen to him or her. We think that everything we are getting is by the grace of Allah, that is, Allah becomes unjust. So we see these kind of a wording from people who are well off. And over here, what kind of a mind Quran wants us? It wants us to look at yatim and miskeen, which are the weakest links in a man-made system, that don't ignore them. If a system is creating yatim and miskeen, that system is not acceptable to Allah. Then his accountability is very important. All of us are accountable because Quran says that the earth and the heavens are created for accountability. And accountability is a positive thing because we make choices. And once we make choices and make decisions, they are going to have consequences. If I'm alone in a forest or in a jungle, it will not matter. But since we live collective life, hence my choices will affect others. And Quran wants us to make those choices within permanent values which are good for everyone. And then afterlife is a very important part of human living according to the Quran. Because afterlife exists, it is a fact. While all of these things are facts, if there is no afterlife in that, that means life will end with death. So what is the point of this life which is not going to go beyond death? And over here, Quran gives us the option that you should look at afterlife because it is part of your existence, because you have a self. And if you have a self which is going to survive your death, that means this factor should be catered for. And then the concept of Allah. So these two concepts make the fundamental foundation of Eimaan in the Quran. Now, this is a simplified version. We can see even from these two diagrams, this is a far simpler version of human psyche than with all this junk within our mind and with all these burdens. We can't simply live a happy life because death is always awaiting us, and death is making us desperate to accumulate more, and our psyche not only destroys our own self, but also destroys the world around it. Simplified model of the contents of the human psyche, coming to grips with the contents of the priorities of the man-made systems and their effects on the human psyche. The concept of material needs and implications of assuming life ends with death, understanding the existence of the self and its latent potentials and their emergence and development. Two fundamental concepts on which Eimaan is predicated, that is concept of Allah and the concept of the existence of the hereafter in relation to the human psyche. Because Allah exists, whether we like it or not. And He's Hayyul Qayyum. He has given us life, and with His concept, which is given in the Quran, we gain new life. But this is our choice. If we do not want a new life in this world, then this is the best we can do. But if we want something different from this, dissatisfied, want a system of deen established in the world, and we want a life which is totally free from the fear of death and huzn, then this is what we have to do. And it's very simple. It's not, it apparently looks as if very complicated, but it is very simple and straightforward if we make this choice. The understanding of the functioning of the law of requital and the law of respite holds key to understanding the Quran. And then is the Quran offers its services to mankind absolutely free, and it is our choice whether we wish to follow it or do not wish to follow it. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of deen. Thank you.